So, following up with Ezekiel 20, another thing that just stuck out to me was in Ezekiel 20:18. I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, or keep their ordinances, or defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Lord your God. Walk in my statutes, and keep my ordinances, and observe them. Sanctify my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you. What stuck out with me here is there's these verses about honor your parents, and that's one of the 10 Commandments, is to honor your mother and father. And then in Ephesians 6, it's repeated again, honor your mother and father. It's the only, I think, commandment with a promise or something like that, you'll live long. And then, there are a lot of verses that talk about honoring your parents. And then there's also verses saying, if you love your parents more than me, you're not worthy of me. If you love your son and daughter more than me, well, that's a different topic. If you love your mother and father more than me, you're not worthy of me. And so it's like, how do those go together? And I think so. And this verse, I think, kind of puts those together in terms of God telling the children of the Israelites, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, or keep their ordinances, or defile yourself with their idols, but walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and observe them. So honoring your parents does not always mean obeying them, does not always mean following their traditions. It's honoring them. I think when they are walking in God's ways, it would be obeying them. And at the same time, it's so much more important to honor God and to obey God than it is to honor and obey our parents. And then this this will be a little controversial too. That verse where it talks about wives submit to your husbands, same thing. It is way more important to honor and obey God than it is to submit to your husbands. Or in that same passage where it talks about submitting to your husbands, there's also a verse, submit to one another. Same thing. It's more important to honor and obey God than to submit to one another. It talks about submitting to government. It is way more important to honor and obey God than to submit to government. Really, all of these things where parents, government, each other, husbands, they are put there. Their role, really, in my opinion, which you can leave comments saying your opinion, their role is to lead us in the ways of God, to provide covering for us so that we can follow God's ways, so that we can thrive. They're there to, and so when they're there. And also, I would say, like, it talks about husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? He sacrificed for her. And is Christ controlling? No, not at all. The church walks in ways other than what Christ would like us to do all the time. And he does not force us to do anything. He does not come down and say, you must submit, church. You must obey me, church. Like, he just doesn't. Anyway, side point, and another way to think about submission even is submitting to one's mission. What is the mission of the husband, really? The mission of the husband is to love his wife. The mission of the husband is to love God, to walk in his ways. So women submitting to your husbands are helping them with their mission, which is loving God, walking in his ways, loving his wife. So we can fully submit to our husbands in that way by helping them to go in the path of God, and whatever that means or looks like. So my point is that when our leaders, whether they're parents, government, husbands, when our leaders, pastors, elders, whatever, when our leaders are not walking in God's ways, it is really important that we choose God and we still walk in his ways over walking in ways that are not of him and using the reason that we are submitting to authority. Like, that is not what authority is there for, and that is not God's plan or intention. And so anyway, this verse in Ezekiel 20:18, where it says to the children, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, or keep their ordinances, or defile yourselves with their idols. Walk in my statutes, keep my ordinances, and observe them. I am sure the parents did not appreciate when their kids said, or if their kids would have said, their kids actually rebelled also, but for those who obeyed God, I'm sure the parents did not appreciate when they said, no, Mom and Dad, I am not going to go to your idol worship. I am not going to do these sacrifices. I am not going to follow your traditions. I am going to walk in the ways of God. I'm sure that created a lot of conflict. And we know from the early church fathers, they did not obey the government. Jesus did not obey the government. He did not submit to the government in that way. Even, I think it was Peter or Paul, when they got arrested and the government was telling him, don't tell people about Jesus. They're like, we can't do that. We have to follow God, not you, and we will submit to the consequences of that. And so the founding fathers got murdered by the government. They got martyred. Jesus got martyred. They would not have been martyred had they been obeying the government and not obeying God. The reason they got martyred was because they were not submitting to the government in that way, because the government was not walking in God's ways. So, point being, honor God above other authority figures. That is God's way. He does not want or expect us to obey authority figures if they are going in ways opposite of God's ways.